Paris, Florida. She's going to be monitoring the chat and asking any questions specific to colors. So, feel free to put any of those in there. And then Dan Corum, who is the specification manager for PPG, he is also on the call. So any product technical questions, feel free to put those in there in between Dan and Michelle. And I'm sure we have some other colleagues on there. If y'all want to introduce yourself, they would be available to answer any of those questions you might have while we're going over this. So we'll jump into it. The overarching theme for 2025 is kinetic. And it is a carryover of Limitless, which was is our forecast for 2024. And in Limitless, we discussed how consumer behavior and design would evolve in a way that removed obstacles and offered more avenues for exploring creativity. Kinetic, which being the evolution of Limitless, kinetic itself is resulting from motion requiring movement for effect. So the big message is, change is inevitable and it's no longer an option. Before we dive into the CU content, though, I just want to go over the PPG commercial for those of you not familiar with us. And this too, we have some exciting news. So PPG, if you're familiar with us, we've been around for over 140 years. We were about 18.2 billion last year. That is our corporate headquarters in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you haven't seen it in person, you might have seen it in maybe the Schwarzenegger movie or Inspector Gadget by renowned architect Philip Johnson. The whole campus is beautiful to see if you haven't been in the area. But we were acquired recently, last week, by AIP. And so everything's staying as is for now, but look for early next year. And Dan, I don't know if you want to put in the chat, maybe you can put the press release, or if you want to put some more comments in there. Any questions about that, feel free to reach out to us individually, or like I said, put them in the chat and we can answer any questions you might have in regard to that. So PPG is actually, they color and coat more surfaces than any other company in the world. So 3 out of 4 cars in North America, same percentage of airplanes, every single Harley Davidson. We do a lot of military equipment. Our consumer electronics division, that does, Beats by Dre and cell phones and laptops and the coatings on cans and covering on Titleist golf balls. Dan and Michelle and my other colleagues on the phone, we are with the architectural division. And you'll see some projects there. You will find PPG on everything from residential homes to commercial spaces. You might recognize Allegiant Stadium on the top left there out in Vegas. I think that's an excellent example of how trends sometimes start at like the 35,000 foot view and then eventually trickle down to residential. And you'll see some of that as we go through today. And that example too is a perfect example of how the dark colors, I don't know how long you've been in the industry. I can say for me, it's the biggest shift. I've been in the industry, I can't believe I have to say this out loud, but about 30 years. And it used to be if you showed someone just a mid-tone color, their knee-jerk reaction was, oof, that's so dark. And now it's the opposite. You show somebody a color and they'll say, well, what's the darker version of that? Or there's so many Black residential homes or, dark navies and charcoals, and a monumental shift from where we were. But again, Allegiant Stadium, a great example of how that started out and then eventually trickled down. We are the official paint of Disney. If you've been there, you will see our product everywhere. My favorite, you'll see on the bottom left, is Falling Water. And I think we did the Falling Water for Unboxed maybe last year. But we are partnered with the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, which owns and operates Falling Water. And so it's all PPG inside and out. Part of our partnership is we can offer complimentary tours. So if any of you would like to go see it or maybe host an industry event there, feel free to reach out and we would be happy to make those arrangements for you, maybe even attend it with you. Sometimes we conduct the CEU there, which is an extra special event. So feel free to reach out in regards to that. So this is our global team that put together the forecast you're going to see today. And these are stylists from all over the world that work with all of those segments that I just showed you. This team has a year's worth of homework. So we typically meet in January. As soon as that meeting wraps, we start on the forecast for the upcoming year. So right now we're showing you 2025, but those of on this team, we're already in 2026, which is weird because we're still in 2024. So when I say this year, I'm often referring to 2026. And so it's almost 2 years ahead. But what this team does is they go to all the major trade shows out there just to get, to be able to share what the major industry shifts are. But this is a small piece of it because this is what's already in the works. This is what's already coming our way. The bigger piece is, how are we feeling as a society? So it's all of us on this call and, all of us in the world, and what are those consumer moods and mindsets? And how can color maybe be the supporting cast for that or the antidote to that? Gray is a great example. In 2008, when the bottom fell out, Gray came onto the scene overnight and it was everywhere because it was very safe. You know, we don't take chances when the economy is scary or uncertain. We go with what's very familiar and what's very safe. I will say nobody predicted that gray was going to last as long as it did, which was a little over 10 years. You know, it has bridged out and now we're moving to the warmer hues that you'll see today, but that was a direct relation to how we were feeling at the time. So these meetings they get a little heated. You can see they get a little messy. We've had years where the moderator made us leave and go drink wine and come back the next day, and it always works. But it's because these stylists they know their segment and they know their audience, and it's a you know to have this global piece and bring it all together is something that we are very proud of. So you will see this reference as we go through today. This is IDCEC and AIA accredited. So on the screen is the IDCEC number. If you have the app, there's the QR code. I can always put it up again at the end if you would like. But Swatchbox is gracious enough. They are going to complete all of these certificates. So whether you need IDCEC or AIA, and there's the AIA course number. If you need a certificate for maybe a different organization, just put it in the chat and we would be happy to get that to you. Okay, so commercial over, back to kinetic. And as you can see there, it says from limitless to kinetic. And the movement of kinetic represents, you know, adapting and adjusting is learning new ways, which has become essential. The next decade will usher in unprecedented amount of newness. What we're going to show you today is 4 individual trend stories. The first, extra celestial, is going to draw influence from energy within. It's this growing trend towards self-trust and kind of, you know, believing in ourselves. Biofuse explores nature, science, futurism, and the fusion of all of that and those influences that have the ability to create a better world. Artificial, you see the AI accentuated in there. So it's art, it's artificial. That is the partnerships with AI and those ever blurring boundaries between what is considered real, what is considered natural, and what is considered not real. And then lastly, Earth and Archive. That one is stokes nostalgia. You'll see a lot of natural materials and exceptional craftsmanship, but also has a contemporary twist to it to keep it future forward. And what's interesting about the stories this year is you'll see there's a lot of overlap. So for example, in the wellness influencer, you will see that in Extra Celestial and in Earth and Archive. If we're talking about AI, that's going to be an Extra Celestial, Biofuse, and Artificial. So while they have their 4 individual stories, there is a lot of overlaps, which makes it a much broader you know, ability to utilize these colors and create a variety of looks. So before we look at the stories, we're going to first look at what the 3 macro influencers are for 2025. And the first is what we call the energy within. And that's where we'll look at some of the dynamics of play on consumer and in regards to consumer and cultural evolution. A few of the examples, Gabrielle Hearst, if you're familiar with her, she is known as the thinking woman's designer. And she is known for responsibly sourced materials and designing quality clothes that can be passed down for generations. DLG Architects, you see in the center there, they are driven by core values that lessen our impact on the planet and maximize a positive impact on the people that use their buildings. Their mantra is people first. They use well design. I'm sure many of you on the call today do as well. And that is a movement that continues to grow. And you've probably heard this, that you know, LEED is for buildings, well is for people. And it's, you know, bringing those together and creating these spaces that are mentally and physically good for us. Nicole Bradford, she is all about promoting the notion that mental and emotional wellness have a high impact on design. And the expansion of human potential is the kinetic energy within. And you'll see how, you know, Gabrielle Hearst, she's representative of Earth and Archive, Extra Celestial, and Nicole is Biofuse and Artificial. So again, you'll see that overlap as we go through today. The next one we call the New Energetic Exchange. And this is about is supporting that connection of science and nature and how the two can be used together to make our lives better, make this planet better. Some examples, 70-degree North Architecture, you see on the left. That is their new project. It's called the Sami National Theater. It is a high school, it's a theater, it's a ranger husbandry school. It's all about fusing the indigenous way of life, the culture, the art, the storytelling, even handcrafted, but it's all gathered under the same roof to create synergy between the users and also harmony with nature. Julie Watson, you might be familiar with her book. It is called Low Tech Design. by Radical Indigenism. And she does, it's interesting, looks to primitive ways of building and living to find solutions for moving forward. Because, many of those things have withstood the test of time, and they're simple and they're basic, but they worked. And so it's fusing together the past and the future. Reef design on the far right, you might have seen that. That is an excellent example of biomimicry. So those are shell-based concrete structures that are built to recreate these reefs. So to get the marine life there, and that in part helps protect the shores and the erosion and the structures that are built there. So it's bringing science and nature together. So excellent example of how that one you will see in Earth and Archive, and then also in Biofuse. And then the last one we call Energy Unbound, and this one is very much an evolution of Limitless. It's the personal productivity and creativity having the opportunity to expand over the next decade. And it seems like it almost grows, on a daily basis. One of our influencers there, Victoria Modesta, she is called the Bionic Pop Star. So she is an amputee, but she works with a variety of designers and creates these incredible prosthetics that help tell her narrative, as an artist. And so it's not hiding something, it's highlighting it, but in a very positive way. Tilly Talbot, you might have seen her at Maison. She is actually not a human. She is an AI designer that was designed by Studio Snoop, and she collaborates with actual designers. And that image you see there was one of the collaborations at Maison this year, where the AI designer was working with the actual and creating these things to bring in, both the influence of, technology and beyond, but then real life and grounded in where we are. And then the last one you see there on the far right, Mario Cucinelli Architects, or MCA. They have a very celebrated collection of built works based on their avid interest in the natural world and how it relates coherently and displays creative empathy. So this particular one is a hospital in San Rafael. It's called the Iceberg. If you get a chance to look it up, it does look like an iceberg from the exterior. But it's all about biophilia and bringing in that natural light, natural materials, and using those elements to help the healing process, both mentally and physically, of having stays in hospitals. So before we jump into the 4 themes, we have to talk a little bit about the color, 2025 color of the year, which if you haven't seen yet, we're going to quickly show you 2024 because it is still 2024. Right now, trends are lasting about 5 to 7 years. So the relevancy of these remain and have several years. Depending on your screen, like on mine right now, it looks pretty accurate. It's a soft honey yellow. I've seen it on some screens like peach or pink or beige or even gray. We'll tell you at the end how you can get the swatch of this. But Limitless is a 2024 color of the year. It is also the overarching theme for the forecast for 2024 as well. And this is just a few of the reasons why it was chosen. We all know yellow is the happiest color, but we are not quite there to have a very vibrant, saturated yellow. We're not that happy yet, but going in that direction. It's also about self-confidence, authenticity, communication, how you see yourself. It's cheerful, it's youthful. If you follow the solar plexus, it's responsible for our authentic self. It is definitely the opposite of dark and dull, and we've had a lot of dull and sterile for many years. So it's going in the direction, and it's interesting to talk about, but I wish this was in person so I could see your faces, because the reality is we are heading back to beige. Whether that's something we embrace or not, it is a direction we're heading in. I work with a lot of builders across the country, and almost every single one I work with is bringing beiges back into their standard offerings. For a while there, their palettes were all gray. They didn't even have a warm neutral. Then we had the bridging hues for a few years, but now, we're definitely going in that direction. So this soft yellow was sort of that bridge to, going from those cool, sterile spaces to warmer and more inviting. And here you see a variety of uses of Limitless, whether it's large-scale commercial projects or a toaster or fashion. In fashion, they call it banana milk yellow. Appliances, automotive. On the bottom left, you see it with our 2023 color of the year, Vining Ivy, and how those work so beautifully together. So again, I wish we were in person if anyone wants to put any guesses in the chat, but the 2025 color of the year is purple basil. And you'll see it in a variety of applications as we go through today, but it's a dark, it's, can almost be neutral. It's a dusty violet, but it has that reddish mauve undertone to it, which makes it lean towards the warmer side. And the good news is it is the complement of yellow. So if you have spaces with limitless or we're utilizing that color, they can be used together in beautiful harmony, whether it's, darker shades of the violet and lighter shades of the yellow or vice versa. But the two of them complement each other beautifully and can create some very dynamic spaces. And this is just a few of the reasons why purple basil was chosen. It was selected for the value it brings to each of the design elements you're going to see today. It's bold, but it's subdued. It's elegant without being too timeless or, too stuck in the past. But balance is probably the biggest reason for this. It is the perfect blend of an energetic red and a calming blue, and we all need some balance in our lives. And it's that tension of blue and red that holds a palpable kinetic energy. So it just fit beautifully into the overarching theme. If you follow the chakra, it is the most important one. And it can be, exotic, it can be mystical, it can be, think of the Purple Heart, it can be courage and bravery, it's our ambition and peace. And so based on what those influencers were, it was the perfect color to represent all of those and be able to bring it all to you in a single hue. Plus, it's just gorgeous, isn't it? So if you're doing the current color drenching trend, or just as a feature wall or some accessories, it's beautiful with the warm tones, especially the natural woods, but it can work with both contemporary and traditional spaces. So we also do a stain color of the year, and for 2025, it is tobacco. So again, towards that warmer side is very earthy. I recently pulled up our stain color trends for one of our customers, and there's not as much movement and distance in stain color of the years as you will see in paint colors of the years. And that's in part because it's such an investment piece. We're not going to change out our flooring every year, our cabinetry, our furniture. But they have been the past 4 or 5 years leaning towards this much warmer, again, away from the gray and cool and sterile, more earthy, more inviting. And you'll see so many examples here, whether it's residential interiors or the transportable sauna or even modular housing, exterior decks, works beautifully in a variety of applications. So now we will dive into the 4 themes, but before we do that, I want to show you the color palettes for this. So again, depending on your screen setting, they might be looking different. Anne-Marie's going to show you how you can order the books and the swatches for this when we get to the end. But you can see they have their individual strengths, but they are also designed to all be used together. So you could pull, a soft neutral from Extra Celestial with an organic hue from Biofuse and maybe a grounding option from Earth and Archive and create some really beautiful palette. But each one of these colors plays a very important role in the overall story. So we'll start with Extra Celestial, and the main character energy for this one. It has that universal appeal to it. It's thinking beyond, it's the cosmics, it's mystery, and just thinking of the unknown. You might recognize that background image. That is the bottom of John Lennon's pool, and he just fit, beautifully with his theme and his way of seeing the world and trying to drive change. The consumer mood for it is detaching from those cultural expectations and finding greater wellness in living life on our own terms. We like to do, the architectural team here for North America, add an additional influencer that we feel really encompasses the theme. So for Extra Celestial, we chose Iris Van Herpen. You're probably familiar with her. A lot of her pieces are on the runway. She's a very celebrated fashion designer. The Limitless slide I showed you, that dress you saw was one of hers. She designed that for the Met Gala, and it was yellow kinetic butterflies. So it just checked all the boxes as far as working with our 2024 and 2025 forecast. But she believes it's possible to merge, stir, and sculpt our senses through a sensitive balance of textures, shapes, and colors. And now we get to see the palette for Extra Celestial. It has a direct link to the galactic sky. So those airy blues represent confidence and trust. The purples represent higher thinking. The reds are there for passion, drive, and energy. And then, had to have the mysterious black, which represents that void of the unknown. Here we see the color of the year specific to Extra Celestial. We had to put the Northern Lights in there. And again, I love doing this in person because it spurs a lot of conversation, but there was so much interest. If you lived in an area where you don't typically see the Northern Lights and you get to, it was just magical. And it was really neat to see that the deep aubergine purple color up there. but on social media, that was your feed for a couple days, just scrolling through pinks and purples and blues as everyone shared their images. Or think about the eclipse, all the buzz that was around that. So that's our interest in what's beyond us, and that, the magical attributes of the galaxy and what lies beyond. So purple basil fits in perfectly to that. The Cartier store you see on the bottom left in Tokyo, it looks like you're walking, into space, going into that showroom there. The materials for Extra Celestial, some of them do have a special effect, but they are, have their links to nature, as you see in the stain colors on the far left. Elegance is coming into this. That's something that started coming our way in 2019. And then it, got very quiet, like everything did in 2020, but it has been making its way back. And it was very evident at some of the trade shows last year, even at the beginning of this year, it coming back. We've had quiet luxury, who's been trending for many years. It's starting to get a little bit louder. We'll go through just some different applications of both these palettes and the story. The commercial exterior, some of these are AI, some are actual, but it has this, angelic, very fluid, wondrous notion to it. The palette, a lot of warm neutrals, again, focus on the warmth, and then those blues there to add a little bit of that mystery and reference to the sky and nature and what's beyond us. The monochromatic approaches continue for commercial interiors, especially in restaurant and retail. It's a way to not cause distraction with the menu, the meal, the merchandise, the intent of why you are there. Beautiful example on the far left. It's very monochromatic, but it has that pattern to it, and it creates so much movement and energy as you're walking through that space. The dark interiors continue. I know we talked about that on exteriors, but they continue for both commercial and residential on the interiors, especially these deeper aubergines and the dark blues. It has that feeling of being in deep space. For residential exteriors, and if you saw our presentation last year, this is something we've been talking about, of bringing some sort of softer lines and curves to residential exteriors. There are no straight lines in nature. Everything has some sort of curve or bend to it, but we build these very rigid, straight line boxes to live and work in. So this is the counter to that, of bringing in some softness, making it feel more natural. And it can be as simple as maybe a barrel ceiling on the front porch of a home, or curved steps, leading up to the porch. Also, what I think is really neat they did this year is you'll see in the palette on the top, there's going to be extra elements in there other than just paint colors. So in this one, those wood tones are really important. And that's an effective treatment on maybe an exterior that you can't do anything about the straight lines. If you introduce some wood, it's a beautiful way to soften it and give it a different feel. Moving into the residential interiors, again, those blues are very important. You'll see a lot of textures. We talked a lot about the lime wash finishes that were making a comeback, and the Venetian plasters and the color washing, giving this subtle texture to the walls that adds interest and dimension and character. Kind of a mystical energy in these residential interiors with those dark colors. Beautiful example on the far left, but it's broken up with, the gold, the textured gold in the recessed area behind the bar, or those beautiful light installations in the white. So even though it's a very dark space, those light elements give it a totally different perspective. More the monochromatic on the residential interiors, whether it's, the deeper hues or the lighter, commercial, or I'm sorry, contemporary or traditional. It creates this softness, but it also has this moody sophistication to it. And it's a continuation of that quiet design that we've been seeing. These spaces, especially in residential, there's a lot of noise and chaos in the world. So for some, it's really important to have these spaces to come home to that is just, to decompress and take a break from all the noise and the chaos in the world. If we look at consumer products, you can see a lot of those borrow very heavily from residential interiors. So with the repetition of layers and forms, and we even have seen that in some automotive interiors and concept cars, it has almost a meditative quality to it. So overall, very warm, lighter neutrals, but some accents of that deeper purple and the darker reds. So I know we don't do automotive or aerospace design, but it's always fun to show what's happening in those segments. Color and design continues to cross surfaces and segments faster than we've ever seen before. So it's not unusual to see automotive designers looking at residential interiors or commercial interiors. It used to be trends started at automotive, then went to fashion, then trickled down to the plastic products. Usually when they got there, it was on its way out. But now things can go from concept to the shelf in a matter of weeks. So we're seeing it happen much more quickly, or sometimes at the same time. So the blues remain important in this one, but if you look at some of the finishes that they can do with like the red wine or the purple basil, giving it that, subtle shimmer to it or color shifting technology takes it to a different level. Even in aerospace, so those dark, all these have this galactic sort of approach to it. The bottom left is actually a concept for an Airbus. Can you imagine being able to fly in one of those? How that would transform your travel experience? So we're ways out from that happening. But I remember going back maybe 10 years or so, and they were talking about the light and installations being added, and it seems so far out there. But now even Southwest and a lot of their planes have it's just that subtle shift of light on the ceiling. And if you've ever had to take a red eye, I cannot tell you how much of a difference that makes. It makes you feel like you can actually do it. But interesting to see where they're going from there. So this one, the darks, the blues are very important. So now we move to biofuse, and this is a very wide-reaching design theme that encompasses the new symbiotic relationship between man, science, and nature, but it's also ancient and futuristic sitting side by side. The consumer mood for this one is unknown territories, and it's thinking like, where do we go from here? But you can see it has a very strong link to organic and natural. And a lot of these examples are a desire for protection and safety that continues to influence trends and our purchasing directions. There's that book by Julie Watson, Low Tech Design by Radical Indigenism. And it's fascinating. If you have a chance to read it, we highly recommend. But the influencer we selected for this one is Javier Senosian. You might recognize him. He did the famous Snake House in California, which is now an Airbnb. It's supposed to be their most interesting Airbnb. But he was chosen, he's best known for his explorations and the interrelationship between nature and the built environment. So biomimicry and biophilia. Another reason that really clenched this one for us as we were going through some options is Michelle Vincent, my colleague who's on the call. When she saw that image on the bottom right, she said, that just makes me happy. And I thought, that's it. That's exactly, what this one is going for, between, the colorful stained glass, but you have those soft fluid forms in nature. And, how can you not be happy being in that space? So if you are not familiar with Javier, definitely someone to look into. So here we have the palette for biofuse, and this one's interesting. It's very calming and natural, but they all feel a little bit altered. We see that connection to nature, but with the nuance in them. Some of the greens are leaning bluer, even gray. The pinks and purples are nuanced. The yellows take on a little hint of green. Some of them slightly acidic, which makes it seem a little bit more virtual. So bringing that together of science and nature, and then purple basil grounds it beautifully. If we look at the color of the year in this particular theme, you can see the influence of nature. That color stained on the wood, as you see in the center there, takes it in a completely different direction. The cutting board you see on the top, that's a natural material, and that deep aubergine, it's only about $500. So if anyone's doing any entertaining coming up soon, that would be a beautiful addition to your display. The materials for biofuse, they're either natural or inspired by nature. So whether it's ocean inspired, you see the bioresins almost look like rippling water. The leathers have texture and a pattern to them. High gloss, lacquers, the high sheen, those are all very important in this one. But some of them look very raw, like almost unearthed, and just something from an archaeological dig. If we look at the commercial exteriors, again, when we first saw this presentation, we thought, wow, there's a lot of AI images in here, but only one of them on the screen is. It's just, this is the direction we're going. It seems so out there, from what we traditionally see, but beautiful examples of using, brandy snaps, that soft violet on the commercial space on the far left, the greens with that undertone of yellow, really linking it to nature. It's the colors, it's the shapes, and, the green spaces that really have this connection with nature and the balance of nature and future. The interiors have this sort of cave-like design to them, and you probably saw that if you saw our presentation last year. That whole cave bunker mentality is there. That's for us, to feel safe and secure. But these, they get a little bit lighter. They're not brighter, but they still have that, enveloping, feel to it, but they're not quite as dark as where we've been. The dark colors still remain very important though. The wood installation and application in commercial interiors is very important to bring in that warmth. And you see quite a variety if you look at the palette, from those soft gray greens, even the darker ones, and then balanced with that slightly acidic yellow and the purple basil. Brings in that nature and future. So more of that monochromatic approach to it, but look at how oversized some of these shapes are. And it's You'll see it both in the furnishings and in the architectural space as well. For the residential exteriors, again, that wood tone is very important. That on the top right, you see the slat walls, which is something that was from the 70s. It started coming back about 5 or 6 years ago. The bottom center is another example of that, but they're with a twist. You know, they have enough of a change to them. They look contemporary and future forward versus what we had in the 70s. But the greens are very important with this particular one, any of those organic hues, especially the wood tones. In the residential interiors, minimalistic design remains very, very important, but these have just enough added to them to make them look a little bit more futuristic, still grounded in organic. So whether it's the texture of the tiles or the flooring, the roundness you see in the kitchen on the far left, you know, or even the lamp in the top center, and bringing those all together to create these organic and grounded yet futuristic looking spaces. The murky browns, those are really uptrending. So we went from the grays to the grays. You know, now we're getting even warmer. This one's that murky brown. Works with a variety of different finishes and colors, as you can see here, some of these examples. But it said has 1 foot in gray and 1 foot in the brown, but leaning more towards that warmer side. You can see a little bit of, you know, almost an Art Deco influence to some of these. And Art Deco has been trending for the past few years. They say we're heading to the 40s next, but there's still quite a bit of Art Deco influence. And a lot of that is, you know, the 2020s aren't that different from the 1920s. You know, with the advancements of technology, they were coming out of the Great Depression, we're coming out of the pandemic. There's a lot of rebellion going on, and people want to do things their own way. So not surprising that you see those introduced here, but the browns, especially the darker browns, are really important in this particular one. This one is interesting. They call it Earth and Fortress, but you'll notice, like, whether it's the ceiling design on the left or the far right, it has a sculptural quality that almost lends strength to the space. And most of it is, again, very monochromatic to not take away from that structural design. That acidic green you see on the bottom right, we don't see that often in architectural interiors, but it's done so artfully there, especially with the introduction of the wood tones to help balance it. If we look at the consumer products, it has that link to nature again and organic, a lot of matte finishes in these, some of the coarser textures. You can see what they've done with some of the finishes up in the palette, adding that shimmer to it. I think that lamp is so neat. That looks like a mushroom. So very much drawing for nature for the consumer products. In automotive, if you look to that industry, you would believe that they think we're all campers and surfers and outdoor people because so many of the vehicles are going that way. They convert to tents, or they have, you know, cooking units they'll pull out of them. So not surprising, the palette for this particular one has those very organic hues. The acidic yellow is very popular in this particular segment, so not unusual to see it utilized here. So then we'll look at artificial. The consumer mood for this one is you know, using that technology to make things better, but it's certainly not ignoring it. It's utilizing it. The nail polish you see there references virtual colors. The chair you see is made from fishing nets that were found disposed of in the ocean to try and help clean that up, and it creates this beautiful piece. Stella McCartney, she's on the far right. She's in our forecast almost every year. She's so future forward, but this time to highlight her plant-based furs. Typically, I'm doing air quotes, the faux furs are plastic, so not great for the environment, but hers are biomaterials, but it's very soft. And so it's a way to get that look and that feel, but staying with plant-based. So Refik Anadol, if you're not familiar with him, is someone, I mean, we could stop this presentation right now and just go to one of his websites, but he does these amazing installations. You might have seen the installation he did on Gaudi's apartment in Spain, but it's fusing nature and technology with existing. He has a piece at the MoMA called Unsupervised, and it's basically an image of every single piece in their collection. So whether it's on display or in the archives, and then it's all fused together in this continuously moving video. And it's supposed to be what the museum dreams about at night when it's closed. And it is just mesmerizing. Again, if you go to his website, make sure you have time because you'll spend quite a bit on there looking at these installations. But his newer one is called the natural model, or the nature model, the large nature model. And it's same thing. It's all these images of nature and organic fused together, you know, to bring nature to these spaces that, you know, might not have access to it. But just looking at it in different ways. So it's a beautiful fusion of nature and science. So the palette for this one, not surprising. It looks at some of those virtual hues. It's definitely much more on the playful side. You'll see, they're much more saturated than what we had in the previous palettes. Vine and Ivy in there, that was color of the year from 2023, remains very strong. Purple Basil there to anchor it as well. And you'll see as we go through how these can be utilized. The color of the year in this particular theme is all about this transitory tone. And that goes back to that, is it real? Is it not? Is it blue? Is it red? Is it warm? Is it cool? And, finding that balance or in between. The materials for this one, they have an artisanal quality to them, but you can see they also look a bit on the futuristic side. So whether it's the colored and tinted glasses, iridescent, holographic, the pearlescent finishes with that color shifting technology. That chair, the 3D felted wool chair was actually made by a robot. So bringing in artificial, you'll see Stella McCartney's plant-based fur on the far left. And again, more examples when we were going through this, we thought most of these were AI, but they are not. The one on the far left is a project going up where they did this beautiful application of these whimsical, colorful accent spaces that are for green spaces. Top right, that's actually Kengo Kuma. I'm sure you're familiar with him. That is a project in Miami. So very interesting interpretation of the Art Deco and the colors utilized in the area, and all of those represented in the palette that you see at the top. Playing with those complements like we saw earlier in the very beginning with the purple and yellow, this one going with the blue and orange, but it creates this visual vibration and has some energy to it of combining those colors and the energy that it creates. This one's called Unnatural, unnatural reference, but you can see when you look at it, you instantly think of nature and some beautiful applications of it using, again, those nuanced colors. So it's like green you see in the pool on the left, but it's not quite the color of grass green. There's those gorgeous tiles you see on the right that almost look like chips that you would see in electronics or in a motherboard. So it's fusing that nature and technology. The wood tones in some of these commercial spaces are very important, especially in the ones with darker hues to help, give it some warmth, but they're all incredibly inviting. You see tobacco utilized in this one with some of those darker versions of the palette. I thought this is a neat name, Casa Graphica, and so you see the black and white on the far left, and that is the black and white continues to trend strongly, but not to be confused with modern farmhouse. This is taken in a different direction. So same hues, but, different style. It has that very strong, like graphic detail to it of accentuating the spaces. The one on the far right, just gorgeous use of the colors to, again, like those leading lines to draw your eye to the view. And you will see those neutrals referenced in the palette at the top and then on most of the exteriors as well. So even though this is a much stronger palette as far as saturation, it doesn't mean it has to be overly colorful. The residential interiors have that softer approach to it, so whether it's soft lines, beautiful example of the lime wash, number 4 there on the bottom in the center, that, creates the softness by having that little bit of dimension to it. Or the furnishings on the far left, even the bottom of the fireplace, having that curve to it. It's, breaking up all of those very straight lines. The pops of color, and this is where it can be really fun to bring those in. Most of these examples are off-white walls, but it, with the exception of a couple of them, but has that punch of color to, make it dynamic, but still leans on the more sophisticated side. This again looks a little bit retro with the, the reference to, some of the 60s and the 70s in here. So the wood's important. A really neat kitchen in the bottom and the center is all very monochromatic with the exception of that aubergine island, which just takes it in a different direction. The consumer products doing the same thing, kind of, creating a dynamic focal point. You'll see at the top some of these finishes have that, oil slick technology to it or holographic where it changes colors, and then also utilized on the walls in that example on the far right. Even in automotive design, this is where they're really having fun with some of those holographic finishes of the color shifting technology, the tinted clear coats, which I think, we showed you a few years ago, remain very important. That yellow car on the bottom right has a burnt orange in the clear coat, but you only see it at certain angles and just takes it, it's like ever changing as the light is changing. And in aerospace, looking in, of course, very futuristic when we talk about aerospace. And I'm sure you guys know that they're working on mass producing flying cars. Like they are available. You can buy them now. It's more, niche companies, and they started around $400,000 if you're in the market. But Joby is a company out of Dayton, Ohio, that is making them, and I'm doing mass produced in air quotes because it's not going to be quite as mainstream as traditional vehicles, but they are coming our way. Uber is testing them in some markets. Celeste is the item you see in the very middle there, number 4. It's this pod. It's connected to an air balloon, but the exterior is like mirrored, so it doesn't distract from the landscape and the view. But because the inside is these very warm beige hues to create this kind of nestling cocoon as you're floating around. I don't know how high it goes because frankly it terrifies me to think of it. But as you're looking at those views from up there, you're in this very warm cocoon. And lastly, we'll look at Earth and Archive. So like I said, this is, it's both going to the past, it's elegance, it's future forward, and it's natural and organic. The luxury continues to increase, but like I was saying, it's a new type of luxury. It's more artisanal. So if you see the marbled, tea set there, those gold images, that was from Maison. So they're replications of tree trunks, but in this, gold finish to make them look more contemporary and elegant. And it's that fusion of nature and glamour. We chose Kendrick Bangs Kellogg as our influence for this one. Sadly, he just passed away, but could not find a better example of, fusing, nature together and archival and just appreciating it for what it is. So whether it's his Lotus House or the chapel, as you see it in the far right, it's blending with nature, it's honoring nature, and it's respecting it. He is considered the American pioneer of organic architecture and very much influenced in his work. So not surprisingly, the palette for this one, it's much more subdued. It's kind of those sun-kissed hues. They say it references the memories of your summer vacations, and you can very much see that in some of the palettes. So the desaturated greens, the natural side, those terracotta hues are very important, and those warmer neutrals and golds. Color of the year in this particular one is directly linked to nature and the qualities of it. That gorgeous purple stain on the stacking storage units you see towards the right, the watercolor on the far left, or the tooled leather, or the tile below it. So all utilizing that color, but in a much more natural, organic way. So not surprising, the materials for this one are very organic. That rammed earth technique, I know we talked about that last year, but it's celebrating nature, and there's gorgeous colors and patterns that can be found in nature. So when you think organic, it doesn't have to be toned down. You can get some very dynamic looks at that, but also think of that artisanal glamorous quality to it. So the burled woods, the marbles, the onyx, that all balances with some of these more softer natural elements. Some of these commercial exteriors look like they could just been carved out of stone in the area. I love the concrete curtain and just the juxtaposition of a very heavy material, but making it look soft and fluid. And those real gentle lines you see on the exterior of the structure on the bottom right, just enough to break up what could have otherwise been a very rigid, straight-lined space. That glamour continues inside. And again, you can see that reference to nature, sort of subdued nature with the pattern, the fresco on the top right, that very Art Deco looking piece on number 2 in the center. And there's a lot of these, you can see a vintage quality to it, and the color palette itself almost looks worn and has withstood the test of time. But you can see how important the wood tones are in that one as well. So more of those murals and frescoes, but in this one, it's those ochres, the very earthy hues, the very soft terracottas play a strong role in these. And that sofa on the bottom left has that curving quality to it, but these are all just very inviting, warm spaces. For the residential exteriors, a lot of the textures, and so many of these are quite monochromatic, but the textures take it to a different level. I love the veiled concrete wall in that example on the bottom right. So you still have access to nature and biophilia, but it's in a softer way. Or that amazing texture in the doors on the far left. That was one of the biggest stories at the Builder Show this January. The doors were massive. Most of them, were a pivot, and they're just, it's crazy how big they're getting. And that was a joke, was, how are they even like transporting these things or installing them? But it's definitely going larger, and that is a great example of it. So again, you can see sort of that retro quality here, the wood tones being very important, but balanced by some of those softer neutrals to create these very warm and inviting spaces. But the darks continue to trend, especially in interiors. And some great examples of it here. The top left, gorgeous example of that dark hue, but balanced with the wood tone from keeping it from feeling too heavy. The far right, that's another example from Maison, where they incorporated wood and the light installation and the glamour and the gold of the vanity and the, you know, historic of the stamped tile on the far right, or the marble floor. It just brings so many of these trend stories together in one image. More of that softness to it. You see the palette on the top has that little bit deeper color with the hip waders, but very organic, very natural. Those textured walls, number 2, that example in the center on the top, it's on the walls, it's on the ceiling, they have the texture on the island and on the floor, and it just, without all that texture, it wouldn't be nearly as interesting of a space. In consumer products, again, that, you know, leaning towards that, you know, both natural and glamorous. You see those natural hues, but it has some gold introduced to it. And those mattes and the metallics are very important in this one. And some neat examples of what they're doing with the finishes you see in the palette at the top. And then in automotive, again, kind of unearthed and very organic, but it certainly has a luxury feel to it, as you can see in some of these examples. And some of the patterns you see in the palette, those would be the interior stamping, although they are working with patterns and graphics on the exteriors of vehicles as well. Another Iris Van Herpen, number 5 there in the center. And then lastly, looking at aerospace, a great way to wrap this up. It's that Luke sunset. So it's the colors of the sunset, but on a much more elevated scale as far as luxury. The boat, clearly that's not automotive or aerospace, but we had to include that. That is Maserati's new electric boat. It starts at $2.6 million. So if anybody's in the market, it's in this gorgeous soft rose gold, very pale terracotta color. So interesting choice of color for it. It has a lot of gold, has some Art Deco influences to it, but it's an incredible machine. So those are the 4 stories, and you can, again, how they all interact with each other. The palette one more time. I'm going to turn it back over to Anne Marie to show you how you can get some of this stuff. But the book you see in the center, that is the Kinetic, that is the book version of what we just went through. So if you would like to order it and go through this at your leisure, please do. You can even order the color of your pendant, which I'm wearing. So it has a sample of purple basil behind glass, and we have a keychain as well. So I just want to thank you all, and I'm going to turn it over to Anne Marie, and she has some really neat stuff to share with you.
Thanks, Ruth Ann. That was like such a fun presentation. I
Whirlwind.
love like looking at all the imagery that was paired with those palettes. It was really great. I think the Extra Celestial might have been my favorite palette of the 4.
It's a
I just
good
like all
one,
those
yeah.
like warm neutrals with those like deep space colors. It's really pretty. I'm happy to see all of those deep warm colors coming back. So
Good, me too. It's a
yeah,
nice change.
it is. So I'm going to share my screen and just kind of navigate through the Swatchbox site to show everyone, you know, how we can. Oh, it looks like you might have to stop sharing so that I can share maybe.
I did.
There we go. Okay. Just took a minute to realize that, I guess. All right, there we go.
There it goes.
So this is the 2025 PPG color trends landing page that you can navigate to through Swatchbox. So this is going to have all of those colors from all of the palettes here, and you can just add them to your cart. You'll see this on the landing page of Swatchbox, but if you also go to the PPG, if you just if you search for PPG, this landing page will come up. And you can navigate to right under here under View on BIMsmith. There's additional options, and this will have the brochures that Ruth Ann was just speaking about. Down here we have the 2025 Global Color and Design Trends book. There's also the 2024, and then the pendants, and there's also, it looks like a keychain that you're able to order through Swatchbox too. So that's all really helpful. And then of course you can get some of the previous years brochures as well. And then of course, all of the options, all the paint options, and they come in nice big samples. I don't know if you can see my screen there. So that's all very simple to order through swatchbox.com. So let's see, now we can start some Q&A. We have a couple minutes left. So if anyone wants to submit their questions, there's a little button on your screen that you can submit. It looks like a few were coming through just about certificates that have been answered. Let me just scroll through here. Yeah, it looks like your team has been answering some of those.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so we're good with all of the kind of certificate questions and things like that. So I think you may have mentioned this. I have a question for you.
Okay.
How long do trends last? I think I heard you say 5 years. Is that
About 5 to 7
yeah,
years right
5
now.
to
When
7
the
years.
economy is really strong, they're 5 years or less. When the economy is not really strong, they can be 10 years plus, which is why gray stayed around for as long as it did.
It stayed along for too
It
long.
stayed a long time. Yes. Yes,
I
it
think we're
did.
all
Yes,
ready
it
to move
did.
on from gray for
Yes.
sure. Yeah. So that's good.
Yes, yes.
Right.
I had to wait to let my hair go gray until the gray trend was, going away because I didn't want to feel like I was
Yes.
jumping on some
Yeah.
bandwagon. It's
Yeah.
safe
Well,
now. We can all have gray hair now.
yeah. Yeah. I think
Silver. I'm sorry, silver.
so. Yeah. Silver, I think that's a better way to put it. Okay, yeah, so the certificate questions, there's an email up there saying where you can send your questions to. You can also send any questions to unbox@swatchbox.com if you have some there. Let's see.
So I know you just started going through them, but how are you seeing the dark purples and some of the other elements? Whether it's countertop materials or flooring or.
Yeah, I mean, I think things are definitely trending more to those like deeper, more saturated colors. I would say, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people kind of straying from the simple white countertops and going a little more to the
Getting
deeper use, which
braver.
is nice. Yeah, a little
Yeah.
more brave. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for a long time, if you showed anything besides like border gray, it was like, oh, is this too dark? But I
Yeah.
think people
Yeah.
people are getting a little more brave now. So it's really nice. And those deep bold colors, I think, really are beautiful and warm and just really add some dynamics to the space. So they're always nice to see.
And it's nice to see people not being as fearful as the darker colors.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I really loved the artificial palette too, for that reason, because it had those like punches of color, but they were still like really sophisticated. So I thought that was a really, really nice palette. Yeah.
Nice.
I'm
Nice.
excited
I'm
to
glad you like it. We had a lot of
try
fun
and
with it this year.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. So I'm gonna have to order that pendant too.
Oh, for sure. Yes, it
Yeah.
goes with everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Okay,
Well,
well,
thank you again for putting
thank
all this together.
you.
And Jared, I think he jumped off camera, who, organized all this. Thank you to them and the whole Swatchbox team. And we're always happy to partner with you guys.
Yeah, yeah, we're so happy to have you back. And this is a really great presentation. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Yeah, so thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye-bye.